Yeah, I'm getting my tissue ready because sometimes I can tear up at podcasts depending on where I'm at. In 2012, I was shot in the line of duty. We got in a car chase with a bank robber, and he crashed. So, that kind of started having me look at my own health. At this point, about 250 pounds. I'm not feeling very positive about myself. I know I'm heavy. The duty belt's getting stretched out, having to adjust the Velcro, and I didn't know what to really do. I was trying to cut back. Typical story, right? You're trying to
Hmm.
eat more plants, less meat because of the high fat and all this stuff. And this guy lost 50 pounds, and he's like touching the rim and stuff. And I was like, dude, you're like my age. What's happening? I was about 49. He's like, I did this thing called ketogenic or keto. And I was like, what is that? I didn't know it was another CrossFit type of training, something I didn't want to do.
Hello, everyone. Adam with Carnivore today. Today, we have a very special guest, Eric Reynolds, also known as Keto Five-O. So, Eric, for those that don't know you, can you introduce yourself?
Pretty much Keto Five-O and Eric Reynolds, like you said, but I'm a retired police officer from Boynton Beach, Florida. And I had my own metabolic journey with obesity, heart disease, and trauma and stuff on the job that led me to the keto carnivore world, and it changed my life, and it's empowered me to do really big and positive things within my first responder community, and of course friends and family. So that's pretty much what I'm up to nowadays.
Awesome. Yeah, that's sounds very interesting. I've seen you around on Instagram and things like that, and finally got a chance to meet you at a recent meetup that we had for Healing Humanity. And thank you for coming out and supporting us with that for sure. And I'm really interested in getting to know a little bit more about you and your program and what you're all about. And what is this Keto Five-O? It's interesting. We're delving into the diet realm and police and things like that. So I'm really interested to figure out exactly what this is.
Yeah, I'm getting my tissue ready because sometimes I can tear up at podcasts depending on where I'm at. So yeah, I guess about my journey starts, I mean, I was a son of a police officer. My mom was a homicide sergeant in Miami. Real quick, if you guys ever want to see her character, Detective June Hawkins, is actually portrayed in the Griselda series on Netflix that came out last year.
Oh
So she's
wow.
battling Sofia Vergara, who's playing Griselda Blanco, who was like a Pablo Escobar type character. And all during the 80s and 70s and 90s, my mom was a super cop in Miami, and I'm, you know, going about my way, eating a bad diet, trying to play football, and anyways, just becoming a police officer. And you know, um, in 2012, I was shot in the line of duty. We got in a car chase with a bank robber, and he crashed. He opened his door. He started shooting at me and another officer, and he hit me in the foot and grazed my leg. And we returned fire, killing him. So after that, at the time I was probably about 220 pounds. I was probably still 50 pounds or 40 pounds heavier than I am now. But at the time, I thought, according to my other guys I worked with, I felt pretty good. And after that incident, stuff starts to creep in your mind. You get a little more hyper vigilant on certain things. As you probably deal with traffic issues, right? So there's always something there that's reminding you of this trauma. And police work, it's trauma after trauma after trauma. Your bucket's full at some point. And I didn't know how to handle it. The only way I knew how to do it was with alcohol and try to eat my way with therapy, right? You're not
Hmm.
going to go search for help. And luckily I took the dive, and I battled workers comp and cried before a board of attorneys that wanted to make sure that I was messed up enough to get therapy that I needed. And it was talking therapy. I didn't want to do drugs. I was a cop during the opiate crisis in South Florida. I saw that side of the medical side, and I saw the darkness of it. So I was never wanting to go that route. And the first step for me was communication, learning how to talk about some of the issues I was going through. And then over time, it became, I lost a close partner, a cop buddy that died of a heart attack. And he was a canine guy, really good shape. And he had recently had stents put in because of some chest pain and the typical narrative. I wish I knew more then to help him, right? But maybe that was his gift to me. So, that kind of started having me look at my own health. At this point, about 250 pounds. I'm not feeling very positive about myself. I know I'm heavy. The duty belt's getting stretched out, having to adjust the Velcro, and I didn't know what to really do. I was trying to cut back, typical story, right? You're trying to
Hmm.
eat more plants, less meat because of the high fat and all this stuff. And I never wanted to cut the drinking back. So I wouldn't like not eat, certain things. Oh, I won't have the chips. but I'll keep drinking. I'm still trying to handle that stress. And then
Mm-hmm.
about 2018, I was playing basketball with a guy that recently lost. I always stayed active, always I was a gym rat, even though I was getting wider and bigger. I still stayed very active, and it was good for my psyche. I knew that. And this guy lost 50 pounds, and he was like touching the rim and stuff. And I was like, dude, you're like my age. What's happening? I was about 49. He's like, I did this thing called ketogenic or keto. And I was like, what is that? I didn't know it was another CrossFit type of training, something I didn't want to do. It sounded awful. And
Mm-hmm.
next thing you know, he told me about it, and I really didn't understand it. A couple of weeks went by, and I sent him a text. Hey, where do I go to find out about that? And first place he sent me was ketogenic.com. And this is 2018. It wasn't all these different platforms that are out there, different groups. And I just kind of took a deep dive into that and what it was about. And I remember thinking, all right, let me try this for a little bit. He seemed to lose weight pretty fast. And I just started meal prepping a little bit more, and I started my eating window changed a little bit. And I continued to drink, but I went to vodka and sparkling water and I dropped the soda. So,
Okay.
I try to tell my guys, you got to do little steps to get to where you get to. Some guys can't go cold turkey with stuff because in our culture, there is no outlet except meditation, working out, alcohol, and prescription meds. And nobody's going to tell anybody they're on prescription meds because they won't let you drive your car, and you lose kind of your police powers and stuff because you're
Sure.
on something. So they hide it. So then it leads to all these other issues. So yeah, it was amazing to start understanding it. And within 20, I think I lost 20 pounds within 2 months, which was the most I'd ever lost that fast. And just continue, I did the whole carb thing, carb app or whatever. I was tracking everything I could. And the best thing I did was start to really pay attention to what was on the back of those labels, and understanding what, I never knew there was all the different names for sugar, and I watched Dr. Lustig's presentation, and then it led me down different routes, and started really feeling empowered by it, by losing the weight. And I started getting a little more, I guess the ketones were flying through my body, and my brain was just getting like, I couldn't get enough of this. Right. And started helping some people I work with. Hey, dude, just quit the Dr. Pepper, bro. Come on, and little things like that, right? And then I lost 50 pounds pretty much over 6 months. I went down from a size like 44-inch waist. I was down to a 38, which to me was like back to my rocking weight as a cop. And
Right.
then, guys started asking questions. First, they asked me if I'm sick because, Reynolds got cancer or some crap like that. So, no, man. And I'm glowing. And they're like, dude, I can't tell you. You just got to change the way you're eating. It's so just magical, And one cop I worked with lost like 50 pounds, right? And he was a bigger guy, so it came off pretty fast. And they just started nicknaming. I got the nickname Keto Five-O. Go see Keto Five-O in evidence. Made sense with the Hawaii Five-O. Fun little, play on the cop
Mm-hmm.
thing. And they call us Five-O in the hood. We'd be driving around. They're hood, Five-O here. And it was just kind of funny. I didn't think anything of it. And I decided in 2019 to retire from police work on my 50th birthday. And I already had a little group set up, Keto Five-O. I think maybe I just started the Facebook group, but it was only like 10 people. It was one of those
Okay.
situations, and
Right.
different departments, some ladies in records, some in communication, somebody from another department. And then it just started growing a little bit. And then I started sharing stuff. And then I went carnivore after I retired. So without the stress of the work anymore, and then going carnivore. I read Dr. Saladino's book, and I was
Mm-hmm.
like, primal, like I'm eating organs. Everyone goes through that stage for a minute, and people thought it was crazy. But man, that weight, I got down to like 175, and I hadn't been that since like eighth grade. And I know
Ooh.
that because I couldn't make weight in eighth grade because it was like 165-pound weight limit at the local football. I play a lot of football. That was kind of my game. So I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't make weight. So I remember that number, like, wow, and here I am rocking at 175, seeing my abs, but, I still had some loose skin and all this stuff from wearing this, I called it my fat suit. I'd
Right.
stretched it out for 50 years. So I was like, all
Mm-hmm.
right, I know I got to learn more about fasting and other things like that. But then COVID hit, and it was like, well, what are we doing? We're selling our house. We bought an RV that's now being, it's held up because of the COVID restrictions, out of jobs, and now I'm more stressed. Now I got new stress. I just gave up the police career, and now it's like end of the world stuff, and you're worried about me So I bought as many of those like organ supplements as I could, dude. I think I dropped like 2 grand. So I had enough, a stash for like 2 years because I was worried the
Wow.
meat consumption. I really went down the rails there a little bit and had to come back out and, understood the immune system and my health and what I needed over that time. And during that time, I happened to get a CAC score. And my doctor was pushing the LDL. Oh, your cholesterol is too high. But I go, I've lost all this weight. I'm feeling fantastic. And I'm like, well, let's see how good your heart is. And they sent me in for it. And I remember him calling me, freaking out that it was a 1500 score. And this is 2019, pretty much telling me I'm going to die. I got, a 9% chance of having a heart episode, of course, into the MESA score.
Mm.
And even if I went Hispanic for my mom's side and white for my dad's side, really wouldn't change it much. I was like, man. And then I realized playing with those numbers, the only way I could really manipulate it is changing the LDL. That was the only thing that ever seemed to change it for their parameters that they set. And I was like, man, this is a scam. And then I found Dr. Ken Berry's video about LDL and don't worry. And, it just kind of snowballed. And appointment with the cardiologist, and he pretty much telling me I'm a dead man, right? Unless I go for statins, we might have to look at stents based on the restriction. They had all this protocol set up for me to do. And
Mm.
I just was like, nope. I just walked, and then COVID hit. So kind of everything kind of happened at once, snowballed. Finally picked up our trailer and RV in July of 2020. And we were already homeschooling. Everything kind of just happened. Like looking back, it was like somebody else was in charge of our chess game, that was going on in life, just pushing us this way and this way. We jumped in the rig, and our family members that we still have in our house, watched our house for us and lived there. And then we hit the road, man. And it was crazy what happened over those next 5 years. I met Doug Reynolds of Low Carb USA, and then I started like going to these different events and meeting these communities of people that have gone through the same journey or starting their journey or not, different people along the different path of their journey is what I'm trying to say. And then I started meeting more
Mm.
cops that were like, man, campgrounds, what happened to you? You lost freaking 80 pounds and what'd you do? And I go, man, you got to give up the plants, and I didn't really try to push it hard. I was kind of leading them towards processed foods. I go, most of the stuff that's processed is plant-based. So in the end, so it's going to be like crap. And you
Mm-hmm.
slowly start educating people that way. And I met, military veterans, and all through the camping life, I was helping people. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. And then in New York, there was a campground, didn't like my police flag. So it turned into this little, as I say, a little shitstorm there for a little bit. And I got banned for 2 months from the camping group because I said some things. And, that was some of my trauma coming out, as I like to say. And we turned into something really good from that. I ended up getting invited to 4 different campgrounds across upstate New York once they found out I was suspended. They're like, bring your family, you're staying with us. And they covered the whole 2 months. And we stayed at places in Cape Vincent and I think Lake Chautauqua and Stowe. And we stayed up near Ogdensburg, and now I hear like Ogdensburg prison. Now I know where the heck it is, little fun stuff like that. And we
Right.
ended up meeting cops and different people at these different campgrounds. And we started having these campfires and, campfire talks. And I realized how therapeutic it was for everybody, and then keeping in touch with people. So I started a Cops and Campers group. And it was just a Facebook group. Hey, we're going to go to cool campgrounds together. If you're crossing each other's path, maybe you're at the same place, just kind of like being our thing. Because at the time, they're flipping police cars. There, wasn't a lot of support for us.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to have that there for them. And, you know, next thing you know, we ended up seeing all 5 Great Lakes that summer with my kids, swimming in them. We went all the way up to Marquette, Michigan. I mean, here I am from Miami. I'm seeing like Great Lakes. I'm like, just like my kids, I'm like starstruck. I'm like, you could drink this? I mean, not that you want to drink it, but it was fresh water. It blew my mind.
Wow.
And the stories and the history. And all of a sudden, I'm realizing we're teaching history to our kids as we're traveling around. I'm learning right there with them, at Fort Niagara. We're in Niagara Falls. And just great. What a great experience we're having. And at the same time, I'm doing this cops and campers thing and helping out with metabolic disease. And we decided to do a documentary in 2022. Me and another officer that is in the film business like yourself. He's retired now, but he's got his big camera and everything. It's a lot more expensive than what I got. And he goes, let's do a documentary. And we did a little 30-minute documentary talking about it, the story of the flag, the campground, and what we're trying to do. And then I use that to try to talk to people in our world, right? And now Dr. Kiltz, he helped us out last year, came out and talked to the guys. I had Kevin Donaldson, who, he's a retired cop that's been through some trauma, and he wrote a book, Man, You're Crazy. And then I had Vance Rowe of Yoga Rescue come out doing yoga with the guys. And, it just turned into this health kind of retreat within the campfires and hanging out, and obviously I've quit drinking about 600 days ago. I finally was able to give that up. It was my own personal journey. Not that I was like, I wasn't drinking and driving with the rig, like, woo, we're camping. I wasn't doing anything that
Right.
extreme. It was just, I think I was just self-medicating, like, microdosing myself,
Hmm.
still adjusting to this new life, because there's a lot of things that come up when you've been routine for, since you were going to school at 5 years old. Mondays usually suck, right? Because it's back
Yeah,
to the
right.
grind. So I had to mentally change myself and do something different with Mondays. Now I call it like
Hmm.
Maniac Mondays. We just go do something different. I got to like mix it up. I hate that because I wake up with it. Stupid day of the
Hmm.
week, which isn't probably even accurate, right? When you think about it. So, anyways, that was pretty much everything that was happening at the time, and really helping guys became the true passion. And now, 5 years into it, we're doing a lot of good things. I'm trying to go to as many of these events as I can get to. Maybe one day I can tell a story and say, hey guys, and do more police events, So, woo, started to get a little choked up. You want to take over for a minute? Sorry.
That's awesome,
Ooh,
Eric. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there
yeah,
and go over. A lot of really interesting things you were saying. Your this TV show. Basically following your mother's life.
yeah,
That sounds really really cool. She sounds like a kick butt lady, right?
yeah.
This
I realized that.
documentary that you did as well. I mean, dude, you're doing all kinds of crazy cool things. So I definitely want to dig into this a little bit more.
You know how cool it was, dude, when we went to Austin, right, for your event, and it was awesome meeting all those people. I brought my kid, my 13-year-old, our first trip, and
Hmm.
he's into parkour and he's into audio stuff. He makes fun of all my videos. Dad, you're terrible, right? He's like my worst critic, right? And biggest fan at the same time, And we go down, and we're doing this parkour stuff. I don't do it a lot. I try to do some. I know my limitations at 55, right? I'm not trying to get broken. They need me to be strong and mobile right now. A lot more calisthenics. So we ended up going downtown to Austin because I guess there's this group called Store, which is this world known like parkour group, and they happen to be downtown Austin. So I brought my kid with my friend Chris and her son, and they got to meet these dudes. It was like my kid hit the lottery. Like me, like Joe Rogan showing up and be like, Joe Rogan, Carnivore, it was a crazy moment. And I always try to tell people, I go, sometimes when you change it up, you try and do some positive different things. Like I never traveled 12 hours with my son before. That was the first time us alone,
Hmm.
him having to manage this stuff. So it was a really cool bonding moment. And turns out he had a better time than I did. And I was like, dude, we freaking rocked it this weekend, and it was just such a fantastic weekend. I never got a chance to tell you guys that, but I mean, what a great vibe it was in Austin that weekend. And yeah, a lot of cool things are going on.
I love that for you, man. That's definitely special. Having two sons myself, knowing how hard it can be at times to, make that connection with your boys, especially during that age range, right? So
Yeah,
they hate you and they love you at the same time.
it's crazy.
So yeah, I'm happy for you that you were able to share that experience with him for sure.
Yeah. And some of the one of the side stories is I recently had my CAC score redone again because I'd done it last year talking with Dr. Ovadia. I go,
Hmm.
hey, it's been about 5 years since I had a CAC score done. And the last time was 1,500. And they're like, well, I wonder what it would be now. Because I think I'd heard somebody had reduced theirs. So I was curious, maybe mine went down, eating clean pretty much, right? And it
Hmm.
came back last year at 4,100. And then it was like, whoa, it's now over 4,000. And I don't want to
Right.
be in the 4K club. So I'm like, well, what the heck's going on, right? So ended up doing some further testing, which is, something that some people should consider, is I did like a tested all my mycotoxins, all my heavy metals, and it even tested me for like Lyme disease and stuff. And it came back with I tested positive for Lyme. Doesn't mean it was active, but it could
Hmm.
could explain some of the inflammation issues I was having during my heavy days when I was active and eating the wrong diet and always thinking it was wear and tear and maybe it was more going on with my body.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had mycotoxins were off the charts. I had a lot of molds and stuff like that, and the heavy metals. Arsenic, I had mercury, and I had aluminum. Aluminum could be anything. There's a whole world of aluminum out there, from deodorants to vaccines to the air that they're spraying sometimes. And
Mm-hmm.
but one of the biggest things I had was the mercury fillings I had in my teeth. I had 6 of them, and they were done kind of like 1980-ish.
Right.
So as my biodentist said, it was Civil War dentistry. It just makes me shudder, right?
Oh, wow.
So, and he ended up removing them over a series, couple of weeks, because you can't dive in and do it all at once because some of the poisoning that you can go through. So it was a lot more important thing than I realized. This whole mercury thing, you hear about it. Here I am
Mm-hmm.
walking around with it in my mouth. And he says it was leaching. So that's when I went to Hack Your Health last year and was kind of like feeling, so I got new teeth now, not new teeth, but, it's feeling
Right.
just empowered.
Yeah.
And I think I got a little bit of mercury poisoning from that. I had a reaction when I got back, a lot of inflammation in weird spots in my body. Something was going on. And I also worked with a naturopath doctor, and she would
Mm-hmm.
give me certain tinctures and stuff to be taking to help me with this detox, and I was still trying to figure out what does that really mean. I was fasting more, and I'd quit drinking previously. So there was a lot going on with my body. So a year later, just this last, I think, end of January, get retested again on the CAC score, and it went up to 5,600. So now I I'm like, whoa, keto 5,000 now, right? No longer keto 50.
Right.
Like I so then, I of course dove into that world for trying to figure it out. The one thing is I think the Widowmaker one did go down a little bit, like 10 points or something, which could be
Mm-hmm.
not anything, but it didn't increase. Some of the other issues seem like, I don't know. I just have this feeling that my body's flush and knows what it's doing, right? Because my
Mm-hmm.
body hasn't been more primal in probably since I was born. I wasn't a breastfed baby. I was a formula baby. They were just in 1969, right? Imagine what their military kid, what are they doing to my little body, right? And all the stuff I was intaking at that point, and then processed foods growing up. And I can see while I was very toxic my whole life, right? And it was just
Mm-hmm.
a slow death, that route I was going. And by cleaning up the diet, fasting a little more. I haven't done those 72-hour fasts yet just because of my lifestyle with my kids. And sometimes, these storms pop up. I can't be all lightheaded trying to figure out my way. And, tornadoes coming. We got to hook up. So I kind of just do maybe 36 hours is about my limit. And, I know that helps. I always feel like a rock star afterwards. But it's, I'm cooking steaks for the family because we're pretty much a ketovore family. And come on, just throw some butter and salt on. There goes my fast, but my body's, I'm listening to my body. So, that's some of the issues that come up with trying to fast and get a little healthier that way. But yeah, as far as in getting maybe another test done, maybe I will, but I
Mm-hmm.
think the mold also was, I wore a vest for freaking almost 20 years. And I can tell you, all those vests are moldy. You try to spray them down with these chemicals, which, oh, great. I'm sure that helped putting that on my chest. And then trying to lay it out in the sun, it never works, dude. So here I am,
Right.
I'm like a petri dish driving around my police car all day. Hey, no vitamin D, even though my arm's out the window. Yeah, vitamin D on my arm. But
Right.
yeah, it was just
Didn't you mention that you were also doing that in Florida?
doing the,
Well, you were an officer in Florida.
yeah,
Did you mention that earlier? Yeah, that's
I'm
usually like
sorry, I
really,
said
really
Boynton
humid.
Beach.
A lot of
Yeah,
mold
and
down there
it's,
too, right?
I'm wondering if they tested everyone down there, because it really is just concrete on top of a swamp, and
Right.
what's happening? Every house has mold. Well, guess
Oh
who's
yeah.
living in them houses, people? We are. So I mean, it's probably a bigger issue down there if they really did a blanket test of everybody. It'd be like, oh my god, nobody would live there. It'd break the whole freaking economy. So,
Right. Yeah. It's interesting you bring up about the CAC score and how yours keeps going up. I think it was Dr. Baker. I just watched a video from him that tried to explain potentially a CAC score that goes up when you're on, basically a carnivore diet. And I can't, I wouldn't do it justice trying to explain it here, but it had something to do with blood volume and things like that. So um, I
well,
don't know if you've seen that or not.
Yeah, he did one about me, about a 5-year carnivore with like a 5,000 CAC score.
Okay.
So I dove into it
Okay.
because I'm like, all right, doc, what you got? Because all these guys like him and Ken Berry, zero score, zero score. And here I am like, all right, well, why is mine so high? Is it I just ate that bad?
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe the stress of my career and then, just other toxic stuff I was exposed to. Maybe the stress of the job is worse than I ever anticipated. I mean, you talk to like Mark Cucuzella and some of his presentations on what, veterans and, first responders go through. I can see why, our heart disease is so high and crazy. So why wouldn't it correlate with maybe higher CAC scores? I'm sure if they tested a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of us, especially if we lost any significant amount of weight. I think there's
Mm-hmm.
something there. But he was talking about too the density, of your arteries. And then when I did the heart flow with Dr. Ovadia sent me for that, and they do the
Mm-hmm.
dye and all that stuff. And I guess I'm at 69%. Um, that's my flow number. So
Okay.
31% restricted. So to me, I'm still good. I'm still pumping away. I'm not gonna lie, I don't train quite as hard as I was. I mean, you're on the treadmill pushing, I feel it more now. It's like me and this guy are so much more connected. And I tried to do NATO kinese, and it was like I'm reading the back, and I took it for 2 days in a row. It's like a blood thinner of some sorts, and I saw it was made out of soy. And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't like this shit. It just made me feel bad, and my wife's making fun of me because it's soy, right? Because I'm trying to be all carnivore. And then she got me the lumbrokinese, which is made from earthworms, and I'm like, this feels better. I don't know if I'm just that much of a carnivore. Like, keep that soy away from me. But
Interesting.
yeah, it was scary. And, you think I look at the AED when I'm at the gym, I'm looking around. I go, hopefully, I don't have an event, because according to modern medicine, I'm at 35% chance now of having a heart episode, which is, pretty
Right.
much heart attack. And I can imagine mine will be tremendous. It's not going to be a little heart murmur. So, yeah. So it's like, well, what do you do? Some doctors
Mm-hmm.
say I need to lower my LDL from 239 by 200 points to get it down to 30.
Ooh.
How am I going to do that? On a slab in the morgue? Hey, he finally got his LDL down. Good for him. I'm like, what's the cause and effect with doing something like that when you're already asymptomatic? I'm not running marathons, never was a marathon runner. I was more of a sprinter type, short spurts, basketball, football type stuff. So I
Mm-hmm.
don't train out of my norm. So I don't see what any other procedures would do right now, right? We're going to step me up for no reason. I
Right.
mean, so yeah, I guess, Dr. Ovadia is probably just looking at me and going, well, you're just somebody I got to watch because there's going to be a lot more guys like you coming this way. Especially if
For
they
sure.
figure out how to fix their diets now. It's going to be a lot of healing going on, a lot. And then they're going to be like, oh
Absolutely.
my goodness, I can't believe I could have. I was never a cop under 200 pounds. If I was 175 like I am now, oh my God, I would have been rocking and rolling. No one would have ever outran me. I would have caught everybody. I'd have been running like, you tired yet? Because I go all day. I'm on ketones. Um, I think back to it. It's just crazy. I would have been just a different cop. I think my temperament would have been different. I figured I would have fasted on duty. So I'd have been razor sharp, like a cat in the night. And then we would have gone out for a big breakfast, whoever was part of my group at the time. And we would have
Mm-hmm.
bacon and eggs and steak and eggs and try to just celebrate a successful shift, and try to incorporate, stop eating that crap on duty and, just some of the bad habits we develop, eating the bad food because it's convenient, and the bad coffee. I got to do the Roots brand coffee, which is no mold, no toxins, which I'm trying to get into and help promote them. And it's just, you got to look at all those little things in your diet, especially if you're already sick and you're trying to get better. I had one of the MF genes. I got one of them. So I really think sometimes my detoxification process is a little sluggish, and my
Mm-hmm.
lymph nodes, I got to work on them. My wife has me doing all these crazy, she's even more down the rabbit hole than I am. Miss Keto Five-O, she ever comes out, you guys are going to love her, but she's still like hard charging mom right now. Like, I don't want any of this. But she loves what we're
That's a.
doing. She just don't want to be on
Mm-hmm.
camera.
That's
So,
awesome. So I want to rewind a little bit.
okay.
Prior to going keto and carnivore, what exactly did your diet look like? Was it just kind of standard American diet, or were you trying different things? Or
I was thinking about that because obviously with my young kids, I think about what I was eating at 13. When I
mm-hmm.
when I see my son eating 5 eggs, I'm like, what was I was not eating no 5 eggs, you know, and I knew it was typical, you know, a lot of TV dinners. My mom worked, you know, she was a divorced mom.
Hmm.
Um, so I had to, she provided the food. I don't think they educated her properly. You know, she didn't know. She thought it was like everyone else. Hey, you know, the government says it's good. This is part of the healthy diet, you know, and we shop for, you know, if something was, you buy 10 for $1, that type of thing. And it was just pretty regular. You know, I ate the school lunches, all toxic crap. And then afterwards, trying to gain weight for football, you know, I'll eat two Whopper, two Whoppers with two fries, you
That'll
know,
do
and it
it.
just carried on. And then got to college, you know, and I was still eating like that. And now you're independent. Now you're able to make decisions on your own where you eat, and then you just continue. You know, we didn't cook a lot at home, so I wasn't familiar with it. I could do frozen stuff like a champ, microwave stuff, and I think about all the stuff I was microwaving, slopping in my mouth. You know, just no wonder I'm
Hmm.
toxic, right? So yeah, man, the home cooked meals was not something I had a lot. Nothing. I mean, my mom was trying, and we'd have, you know, we'd have Christmas and Thanksgiving, but day to day, it was processed food. You know, and looking back,
Yeah.
that's how I ate when I was on my own. You know, until I finally met my wife, and she comes from a Turkish background, so they do a lot more family cooking. Even though they cook with way too many carbs and not enough meat, but we're
Hmm.
changing that slowly. But I finally started paying attention to it, and then with her diet, being pregnant with my son, going natural, and you know, really understanding his diet and breastfeeding, and diving into that world, reading some books, you know, and understanding like, wow, it really is important if a woman can breastfeed, like the long term success
Hmm.
of that child, you know, and yeah, you know, I also saw the effects of trauma on my second born. You know, he suffers from Lyme disease, and he's a lot more cautious. It's almost like that DNA from my event got passed down to him more. He's a little bit more level headed. He ain't taking no chances. My other one's a maniac, you know, he'll jump off of stuff, obviously parkour, you know. The other one's like, I don't think I would do that. So, but his diet's a little different. He's got a really sweet tooth that we kind of just feed with like blueberries and strawberries. And, you know, my wife makes 3 ingredient sourdough bread, you know, and
Hmm.
anything. She dips into a little bit of cassava, like pasta once in a while, because you know eating keto carnivore with kids is kind of restrictive at times, not on purpose, especially when you're in an RV traveling around. You know, we can do the honeys, we can do the bone broths. You know, that's what they start their day off with, a little bone broth tea that she makes. You know,
Oh,
and
nice.
it empowers them, and then they get ready to eat a couple hours later, kind of like the way we eat, and they thrive. You know, being homeschooled, you know, they get a little lazy at times because it's like, well, they don't have to go to the bus stop, right? You know, there's all this
Right.
stress they don't have. So we have to kind of mix it up with them a little bit with some of the, you know, helping out with chores. And we help friends at farms. We try to, we've lived on farms for a couple months at a time, like working out there and processing animals and all this stuff I never did as a suburban kid, you know? So it's been, you know, it's been a lot of fun being with them, and you see the importance of having, you know, both your parents in your life. You know, I didn't have that growing up. You know, no sad story about, oh, my parents being divorced, but they have been married 8 times. That just gives you a little tale, you know, of the trauma in those years. But you know how important it is for the confidence in my boys, and you know, as they develop, and especially into this world of nutrition and health, they're just going to be pioneers. You know, I want them to follow Grace's path and be up there one day and doing their own thing to help kids. They do it now by eating pork rinds instead of Doritos. You know, some of the kids at the campgrounds ask him, "Hey, why are you eating that?" And he's like, "Well, look at the back of that bag. Look at the back of my bag.
That's
Pork
awesome.
skin." You know, something simple like that goes a long way. You know, especially when my kids
That's
doing some
awesome.
cool stuff. They're like, "How do you do these?" Like, oh, I don't eat that, you know, or drink that,
Right.
you know. So that's just, you know, I love how they have a little mess. They don't even realize that. I go, dude, you got something here, you know. My son met Ken Berry at one event, and Ken Berry goes, "You know what? I'm sure a lot of girls out there would love to see you on a YouTube channel." And that was it. My kids won't stop. He's all like, "Dad, I
Nice.
need my YouTube channel. Dad, dad, dad." I'm like, "Oh my God, I can't manage this too. Come on, you know." But I want to empower him because he does have a message to tell, and you know, I think he could help a lot of kids get off that train that unfortunately their parents were taught bad habits and stuff too, and it's just passed it down. You know, try to get
Yeah.
through. You know, there's going to take more because all of us have kids that need to, you know, we need to empower them too. So
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that's probably more important now than it is ever. The youth have to be the ones to kind of spread this knowledge amongst their group because they're not going to listen to old guys like us, right?
No, no, you're cool, but you're not that cool. That's what
Right.
I get.
Yep. So I wanted to go back to when you were an officer and something that you had mentioned as far as the trauma that you guys go through and PTSD that you have afterwards and things and just all the different issues and things that you have to deal with. So eating a poor diet for one, we know can lead to mental health issues, right? But it seems like it could be compounded for you guys because of all these different situations and scenarios that you have to be in. Do you feel like if your colleagues or former colleagues had been eating a ketogenic or carnivore diet, would they be able to handle those stresses and traumas better than what they do currently eating the diets that they are now?
It's got to be better. I mean, it's not getting any better the way it's going, especially with some of the suicide rates and some of the. I mean, our divorce rate's insane. We have
Right.
this adrenaline addiction at times that can be very toxic. I mentioned alcohol before. Within our community, it's very accepted. We even protected culture that we have with the alcohol, and it's really detrimental. We take more chances. It impacts our life in such a way of that we don't realize it long term. Everything from obviously your organs and your mental capability. So yeah, if you could eliminate some of that, get into eating cleaner and taking care of your body. I mean, I always tell guys, you know how to write a search warrant, you know how to write a probable cause arrest report. Understand your blood work. Understand what nutrition is for your body when you're feeding it. You know the right kind of gas to in your police car. You know, so this is some of the things I try to get through to them. And man, I think use of forces would go down because you're going to have less of us being hangry on duty. It's already frustrating the job already. And
Right.
so if you have a little level-headed cop, quicker action cop, maybe it saves some of our lives that we're recognizing threats a little sooner. Because I know when I am in ketosis or when I'm fasting and I haven't filled up my belly with toxic food, I can move around. I can think quicker. It's almost like playing sports. You don't play on a full belly, so why would you do a job that's going to impact your life, right? At one moment, your life could be on the line, whether it's fighting
Hmm.
with the suspects, chasing somebody, or making a decision not to chase somebody, or because that's half of it. We put ourselves in some really bad situations with car chases and decision making, and now you're like the worst cop in the world because you lost your cool, and maybe you did 20. I mean, one time a car went by me in front of the police department, and I chased it down in my police car because I had no driver in it because the lady left it in freaking drive. And I jumped out of my police car, jumped in this moving car like a Tom Cruise Mission Impossible movie, stopped the car after it bounced off a tree. So I'm like, nobody saw it. Nobody's around. Crickets. And the lady runs up finally going, "Thank you, sir." And then she wanted an accident report. So then I had to do a paperwork report. But that's the
Nice.
kind of shit that happens. I mean, I
Right.
don't know if I ever reacted that fast, or certain situations when you have to be ready at any time. I think when you're in that state of mind, you're just going to be better overall. And you're going to, it's going to be contagious. You're going to talk to guys on your shift. Stop drinking that freaking monster because you're crashing all day. Let's get you right. And it'll spread to their families. That's one, a lot of us are married to teachers and nurses, and they have their own indoctrination with this field, whether it's blood pressure and then it's the cholesterol meds and get off of red meat. I hear it all the time. They look at me like you're just eating meat, like I am just from planet Meat Mars or something. It's just crazy. I'm like, I'm telling you, stop looking at the LDL, stop looking at all these, look at, obviously most of the time it's your inflammation markers, and you can really see a lot of what's going on, and some of the ratios like my triglycerides and the HDL, I mean, those numbers are all good. That's what I worry about. Yeah, I am concerned about the high CAC score, of course. I don't want it to keep increasing, but I know my body's doing what it's supposed to be doing, and I'm not having anything negative right now. So what do you do? Do you mess with something that's working good, or do
Hmm.
you? I mean, it's tough for me to just commit to that side of the medical thinking that I should have some invasive procedure or stress test to test me again. You want to keep testing me all the time, for what? Get me on meds. That's the
Right.
end game. I mean, I'm patient for life until death does us part, and then you move on to the next person, and we got a story of my wife. Her dad died because of medical intervention. His whole life got pretty much rotted away, and then her mom never followed that same path, and she's alive and kicking. So I mean, we have an example right there with her parents, and it's pretty sad that you're seeing it going on, and that's why I love what you guys are doing. I mean, I kept having to hide my tears every time I'm seeing these movies that you guys are doing and all the clips, and I'm like, I can't take it anymore. I get so mad. I want to be like part of this whole, Maha movement and start taking down some of these bigger corporations, because there's people with these big fancy houses and boats that are profiting from all of us in this, in this turmoil. And I get
Yeah.
really like, I want to go after like RICO laws against. They talk about organized crime. What do you think this is? This is organized killing, and
Right.
we gotta. I'm glad some stuff's finally come out about it. But yeah, it was a rough 2020 trying to speak my mind on social media.
Yeah.
All of a
I can
sudden I
imagine.
went nowhere. I'm like, what's going on?
Yep.
So
Yeah, it's really tough filming this documentary. We try to segment things out and have do specific interviews for obesity or heart disease or cancer or whatever. But the reason why Carrie wanted to do that documentary is for the mental health issues that he had and then was solved through eating the carnivore diet. And by far, that is the thing that is most upsetting about interviewing these folks or watching these interviews happen, at least for me, from my perspective, is every single one of these people had depression and anxiety and mental health issues. Every single one of them. So, we went there to get their story on whatever, obesity or whatever, but almost every single person has some sort of issue with depression and anxiety, and it's really upsetting that a lot of it seems like a lot of the world's ills could be solved just by eating from this section of the grocery and not this one, and we're not told that. It's a
yeah,
travesty.
it's been rigged. The whole system's rigged, man. And the way they provide this free food all the time. I'd see this, these, they're it's charity, and I'm looking at the stuff. I'm like, oh my god, I know it's short term fix, but that's the long term solution they always have. They always have sending that processed garbage and helping people with that stuff. And one of the cool things we were able to do is go around. Speaking of Kerry and how he's homesteading and doing stuff, that's what we've been dreaming to do. Is
Hmm.
finally find a place and start having our own chickens and doing this kind of crazy life that I never thought. I always joke my wife wanted to turn me into a farmer. Like years ago, I made the joke, and she's slowly doing it. Magical powers, and we we've looked through Tennessee, we looked through Alabama. There's beautiful places out there, but then we also fall addictive to the move of going to different places all the time and not having
Hmm.
to rush back for something.
Right.
Whether it's a job or a house you got to take care of or some other commitments. When you have this type of freedom, it is insane, and it's so healthy. Going out to all these different areas, different hikes, and different farmers markets, and talking to different people in different areas. It's just been that's been part of this journey that's been healing to me too. Just understanding, and then obviously what you guys are doing, and then some of these different groups that we're all a part of, to see how bad it was for a lot of people, like truly how bad and how far they've come. It's really motivating. And then you realize, man, I wasn't that bad. I lost 80 pounds,
Right.
big deal. This dude's losing freaking 400 pounds, right? It's like, wow,
Hmm.
dude. And then you see the power in it, and then it inspires, and then you're like, man, I got to do better. I got to help more people. I got to follow this guy. And I start thinking of all these people that reached out before I've talked to and I haven't followed back up with, and I'm like, man, I can't keep up with it. I need a team, that's why I'm trying to,
Yep.
you know, keep being around all you guys, and ladies, of course, just this whole movement that's going on, and every opportunity to get to an event, if you can get to even one of them, and, it's just so empowering, and it'll change your life. It's pretty impressive what you guys are doing, man.
Well, thank you. I think it's more impressive of what you're doing. Your boots on the ground and getting out there and helping these cops and first responders. And I want to talk a little bit more about that, your cops and campers program. So if anyone is interested in that, how can they connect with that or figure out, find out more information about it, or maybe go to one of these events?
Yeah, we have a landing page, pretty much copsandcampers.com. Anybody's interested in donating. We also do accept donations for what we'd like to do is possibly provide campers that guys can come stay in. Maybe it's a cabin. The way it usually works is we get there Thursday, we have a little bonfire. I've joked around about having name tags for different cities because Boston cops rag on the New York cops and New York cops rag on the Jersey. We all got our little pecking order to start messing around with each other. So it's a good icebreaker. But now most of us know each other. And then Friday we start, we have yoga in the morning. We try to have breakfast and some coffee. And, there could be different hikes planned on different, there's different levels of what people want to do. A lot of guys just like to decompress and hang out at the campground, swim around in the pool, maybe just chill, right? But, you got a campfire going. You're going to have good barbecue and it's going to be heavy carnivore. I can't take away all the bad stuff yet. I got to do it slowly.
Right.
It's like, kind of like with clients I work with. I just can't go in their house and take everything away. You got to start a little bit at
Hmm.
a time. And alcohol is one of the things that's very prevalent sometimes, not like all over the place, but guys are decompressing. So that is
Right.
something I try to work with the guys. Like, all right, don't get too bombed. You can ride your light buzz out from a couple beers still and walk around. Don't fall over, and really talk to them about different aspects of being sober. Is one thing. A lot of them are still on the job, so they still got the stress. Stress management's big. That's why I have guys like Dr. Kiltz come out and talk, about how healthy this can be for them if they want to get off some of the medications, and because they're all now either already on cholesterol meds, they're in their 40s, they're already being told, they're already on track, as I
Hmm.
call for that end, and Alzheimer's and dementia and having a diaper on the rest of your life. And I try to tell them that you don't want to be like some of those guys that we've seen, and you want to be in control of it, not them. So yeah, that's one of the big things. But one of the things I found out too is the kids being all interactive together. We always have a ton of kids there. There's tractor rides. We had the Army reserves come out with bounce houses so the kids can bounce around, and it's just a real chill, safe spot for us, which is what we need. And we have rock painting. Guys can, we have a little memorial section. Guys can write a rock for whatever they
Hmm.
want, and it's just a real therapeutic weekend. And Saturday, after kilts and some of the guys talk, and we have a cornhole tournament, for bragging rights, which I'm terrible. Every time whoever gets paired up with me, you can always see the shoulders of the other guy that's with me, just like, we're not gonna win. I just can't figure that damn thing out. I throw it too far. I'm just like, caveman. Maybe it's too much carnivore. And I
Right.
got to throw a rock. Maybe I'll be better at it, or a spear. But yeah, then we have a live band that night that kicks off the final part, and there are a bunch of retired cops and corrections guys and different and they just rock out for the last 2 hours, and overall the whole weekend just turns into therapy in a way because guys meet other guys that are into fishing, other guys are into race car driving, or and all of a sudden
Hmm.
you just the network grows, and then hey, you're gonna go camping next summer? Yeah, we're going here, and they're like, oh, we might be passing through, so all of a sudden now you're building connections, and a lot of these guys are lonely on the road, they're retired, they're trying to find that lineup, that group again, because we were part of
Hmm.
that for 20 something years. You're part of either a special unit, a road patrol unit, maybe you were in the military before, so you're part of a platoon, maybe you played high school football and stuff like me, so you're part of a team. And just later in life, especially as men, I see it, we get lonely, we get kind of lost, so
Hmm.
having some purpose seems to help. And if your purpose is diet and then also taking care of yourself and enjoying your retirement, it seems to be working. We die 6 years after retirement, almost half of us, around 66 years old, which is crazy that we're not even making it to our 70s after everything we've
Wow.
done, right? So, and we had one cop, he had three pensions. He had one from freaking Coast Guard, our department, and then school board, and dead 5 years later. It's just
Oh
like,
my
what was it
goodness.
all for? What was it all for? Heart attack, right?
Hmm.
So I don't know the specifics. I don't know if there's any other issues, but I know it's a standard end for us. It's usually heart attacks, like most men, and it's even worse for us. And you're either
Hmm.
gonna follow that other path that we've seen over and over again, and that includes suicide, you know, or you're going to try to make a change now to help you enjoy those years. I gave up
Mm-hmm.
5 years of a lot of money that could have probably had a place like this behind me, but you know what I got out of it? I got my health back. I got my wife and my kids back. I got my life back. So that's been the lesson there, that money's not always worth it.
That's right. You got the more important part of the deal. So that's
Yeah.
awesome. So
I
you
meet
say
guys like
you're
you, man. I'm giving out these awesome challenge coins to everybody.
that's right.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, that was super cool. Thank you for that. Also, I
yeah.
showed my wife that, and she's into that stuff too. Because our son was in the Marines, so
Okay.
the whole challenge coin thing and all that stuff. He's got a lot of those. But
Yeah, I put
yeah,
it
I
on
thought
the
that was
key
a really
ring
nice touch.
so I wouldn't lose it. But yeah,
Ah,
it
cool.
came from the police world, and I started giving them out to doctors and practitioners I met at events. And I was also giving them out to my clients when they hit 20-pound barrier. I'd send them a Keto Five-O coin. Like, hey, you got to earn
Oh,
your
that's
coin.
awesome.
Now looking back, I'm like, hey, is it like getting your chip for not drinking? But it was almost like getting your chip for not eating this garbage, right? So
Right.
it seemed to be pretty successful. And then once I started giving it, I remember I gave it to Dave Feldman, and he said the next day he couldn't stop playing with it. I guess he just kept playing with it in the hotel room. Big science guy, right? And he's just like, this is
Right.
the neatest thing ever. And I'm like, I'm going to keep giving them out to people because it seems to be, it has a good message attached to it, and
Hmm.
it's something different than a business card, and it adds a little weight to it, and it's just, and it comes with, there's a purpose there. It's,
Yeah.
hey, and the way it works is usually, you're supposed to challenge each other. Like if I saw you and you didn't have your coin on you, I'd have to buy you, like, I don't know, a steak or something. So
Oh, wow. Well, I'll
instead of a
never have
beer,
mine
because
on
we're
me.
not. But I
I'm
guess that's
kidding.
how it would work in our world. Like we'd have your coin, and if I didn't have it, I'd have to buy you a beverage or something, sparkling water. So
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. So your cops and campers program, do you see that more as like an outreach program as opposed to like a brotherhood, or people that have already adopted the ketogenic or carnivore lifestyle and they're just part of the club, or both?
it's a little of both, because it's kind of changing depending on where I go. We've had these pop-up camp events, which is, hey, we found out 5 other cops are in the campground, and we just have a campfire that night. So all of a sudden
Oh,
that
cool.
becomes a session, and you didn't even plan on it. And
Hmm.
we've had 5 events, 2 in Georgia, the 3 in New York. And I'm looking to expand. I got offers to do one in Texas, Utah, Michigan, but it's a lot, to organize that, to get my rig out there, to run this whole thing. So that's why we do accept donations to help us out, but it's also to provide locations for guys to go. If I can lock down a campground, then I'm able to say,
Hmm.
hey guys, I can give you discounted rates, or I can get a band there, or we can get a food truck, a carnivore food truck to show up, or something like that, right? And it just opens up more resources for me. I mean, these
Hmm.
platforms of talking to you guys has opened up a tremendous amount of cops that found me that couldn't find me the regular cop route. Because there isn't a
Right.
big movement about keto and carnivore within the cop community. All these health events that I go to, whether it's the FOP wellness thing, yeah, they'll teach you yoga. They'll teach you. They may have some protein powder. Oh, the newest age. This will make you. You'll make SWAT now. Shit like that. But if they're
Right.
looking for long term health, they need to be part of certain programs. With ones with like Sean Baker's doing, and Dr. Tro. Their organizations. Like when we can get guys there to invest in themselves, that's going to spread like wildfire. And then when we can go to these police conferences and talk to the chiefs and talk to the sheriffs and say, hey, and talk to the city managers that are controlling the budgets for all the high premiums on their healthcare. You want to get healthier cops, you're going to pay lower premiums. So now you're talking money. So that's the way to
Yeah.
get, and I don't know, we got to get American Diabetes Society knocking on doors, maybe they'll stripe my rig and my truck. I'll pull up, big badge on it. I'm here, Keto Five-O search warrant. We're going to fix you guys, or something. There's a lot there that we can do to really help. And it's not just first responders, of course, it's across all these professions, but
Hmm.
that's my niche. And I know these guys, with us dying so fast and not enjoying our families and our pensions, that they need a better route. And I think, getting in there and, really selling it from the top level down, and getting training sergeants in there and training units involved, and understanding why their guys are maybe having a use of force is because he's hungry. Maybe that's why he tuned that guy up. He wanted a
Right.
Snicker.
Yeah.
He wanted a Snickers. Instead, let's get him a freaking beef stick, something like that.
Right.
So
Yeah, I love that. So, in your journey, did you come across anything particular that helped you? Any resources or maybe books that you would recommend for folks that were in this similar situation that you were in?
And the first books I read was Nina Teicholz's Big Fat Surprise, and understanding the corruption. That was a
Hmm.
no-brainer. Once I started seeing that side of it, and certain documentaries like Magic Pill, Fat Fiction, and all those started opening my eyes to wow, how really deceptive they've been, with everything. And I took it personal, really did. And I know a lot of people are affected by it. And they're
Hmm.
like, if they just knew the right answers, So yeah, I mean, those were the resources I went to. Um, Finding a group, I think I joined, it may have been a Facebook group, ketogenic or whatever it was, and I started seeing people's
Hmm.
stories, kind of like what you guys talk about. That's when I remember scrolling through and then putting my story out there when I lost 50 pounds and seeing all the positive feedback. And it was just really cool to be part of a community, and that's one of the biggest steps I could do. And that's why going to these events, if you ever get a chance, go. It's your health. Usually we always get. I know the cops. We get this little $1,500 for our health savings account, so you could use it for your prescription drugs. And we used to
Oh,
do.
geez.
We would go to Walgreens at a liquor store and we would buy booze with it because that's the only way it would accept it because it's connected to Walgreens. So we had all the
Right.
scams, but use that for some better purpose. Get a health profile through another doctor, get a second opinion. Use that for different ways to get therapy done, whether it's acupuncture or meditation or something else that can maybe help you. Because most cops that I know, we got into this job because of trauma. Something's happened to
Hmm.
us, and you want to help. You want to like make a difference, right? Well,
Hmm.
sometimes we haven't dealt with our own trauma, so I think that could be a way for guys. I don't know if they need more. They try to have these. They call them after action, like, oh, let's get together. We just had a big incident, and then everyone tries to talk. And all right, well, these counselors are available, or this, and then in the end, nobody uses it. No one's going to come back. They don't
Hmm.
do a follow up. After my shooting the next day, me and the other officer were in getting cleared by a psychologist the next day.
Wow.
I hadn't even soaked it in yet. I was still like, oh, am I getting paid this week? How's that work? Am I going to miss
Right.
a paycheck
Yeah.
because I wasn't at work? I was working on all that. It was just crazy. So yeah, there's a lot of things we can do to tighten, our belts, as I would say. I guess that's a good little slogan,
No pun intended.
right?
So if you look back to yourself, the way that you were, 250 pounds, terrible diet, you're not feeling that great. Let's say there's somebody that's watching this and they're in the same position that you're in, right? They're high stress, a lot of trauma things happening in their job. They're overweight. They're metabolically unhealthy. What would you recommend to that person?
Um, I would first thing I would do is get an eating schedule, an eating window, and then we can work on the foods that you're going to eat in those windows. This snacking stuff's for the birds. You don't need a damn metabolism to be moving all day. Why do you think there's all these cancers of pancreatic cancer and then all this? I mean, we're wearing out our digestive system, by processing all this crap all the time. So I would definitely get an eating window in. I would just start becoming knowledgeable. I mean, to go to the academy, you had to read case law, you had to study stuff, right? You had to learn use of force, your steps to go up, whether you can use your pepper spray or aspirin or gun. Well, know stuff about this. You should know your blood work. You should know if you're overweight, you're overweight. So how are we going to do this? And eating window, meal prep. You got to be in control of your own food. They are not selling healthy food out there for profit. It's usually not happening unless you're a Whole Foods, and even all that stuff's not totally healthy. So
Hmm.
you got to take control of your eating. You got to feed yourself. And if you can't do that, you're never going to be freaking healthy, and you're going to end up dying probably a slow, metabolically medicated death. And it's sad, but look what's happening around us. How many old folks' homes have we been in? How many death notifications that I see in South Florida of just people with like tons of bags of medication in their freaking bathrooms, and you're sitting there like natural causes, looking at the death certificate. That's not natural causes. We killed this dude. The system got him. And you see it over and over again. Do you want to be like that guy? You know, so you got to take the jump. I mean, we will go through a doorway to go after somebody. Well, think of this is that bad guy you're chasing down, and it's sad. I think about my boys all the time. Like, man, thank God I found this way. Of eating, at least, giving myself a little extra time in life. Because we never know when that is. But you don't need to expedite it and help them. And just they know what I'm talking about. They don't want to be found like that. They want to
Yep.
be as healthy as possible, and their kids will remember them healthy and vibrant. And I know a lot of guys. I got in the kid game late. I was in my 40s. Guys are laughing at me. They're retired. Oh, I don't have to worry about kids. I go, you know what? My kids saved my life. They keep me active. They keep me hustling. They keep me thinking about. I got to do this. So I can't be lazy today. I can't just watch Netflix.
Right.
Unless it's Griselda. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
You actually do see a little Keto Five-O in there. I get a little cameo as a kid. They got my character in there, and he's definitely not
Really?
a. Yeah, I was pretty disappointed. He's definitely not a carnivore. Nothing against the kid, but maybe he'll reach out to me as he gets older, and I can help him out. But
There you
it's
go.
pretty wild. Anyways, yeah, you got to stay motivated, man. And as they say, was it you got to stay ready so you don't have to get ready. And even when you retire, you're still a police officer. You're still going to maybe be in a situation that you may have to do something, whether it's intervene, help somebody who's having a life, you know, event. It could be you're at a situation that is a terrorist attack. It could be a car wreck, and you got to remember your training of tourniquets. And, there's stuff that you kind of just want to remember, and you don't want to let those skills go to waste. And I just think if you're eating right and you're able to understand your diet and your body, that you're just going to be a better human being overall.
I love that. So, if anyone wants to connect with you, where can they find you? I know you're on Instagram and you have a website as well.
Yeah, just anything Keto Five-O. That's FIVEO, and or Cops and Campers. You can look it up. Pretty much, you'll find me, and send me a message. I'm answering them all the time, and my journey is different than most. I mean, I'm still working on this, trying to figure out why my calcium is just. Well, I just turned into the Thing from the Fantastic Four, just to be this freaking calcium monster or something. I don't know what's going on, but everything else has been healed. All my skin, everything they say about your body healing by eating this way, it's just been amazing. And the fact that we could have been doing this our whole life, just think how much we could accomplish if
Hmm.
we started from the get-go like this, right? So
I
it's
love
done
it.
for a reason and profit. And once you guys understand that human beings can be very greedy and cruel, and we've seen it. So you just gotta understand that it's you gotta fight with yourself to do the right things, man.
Yep, absolutely. So, Eric, I definitely appreciate you taking the time to share your story with me and getting to know a little bit more about your Cops and Campers program. You're doing very important work out there, and I'm going to make sure that all those links are in the description below. You said you had a fundraiser. I'll make sure I have that link below. I'll get the link to your documentary that you did as well, and make sure that's linked below all your socials. And I just want to do what I can to try to help promote you and what you're doing. You're doing the Lord's work, and this is very much needed in today's day and age. And I commend you, and I really can't thank you enough for what you're doing for not only yourself and your family, but your fellow officers and your fellow man. So I truly appreciate you.
We need to have a carnivore camping group.
There you go.
We'll
Well,
follow the beef.
if you start that, I'll link that also.
We'll follow the herd of beef.
Right there you
Right.
go. I
So,
love it.
all right, man. Thank you.
All right, we'll chat soon.